Hi guys, and welcome to Last Light Radio channel. Tonight we step into a restless young America, a place that speaks warmly of freedom while building its future with chained hands. You can almost see the early morning mist hanging over riverbanks and muddy roads, hear wagon wheels sighing through wet earth, and feel the hush of a country still deciding what kind of soul it wants to keep. But beneath the grand words and polished portraits lies a harsher truth. What did daily life feel like for Black Americans in 1800 when slavery was not fading away, but spreading wider with every season? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And while you are here, comment your location and local time so we can see who is listening together in the dark. Now, dim the lights, and let yourself enter the year 1800, where the air smells of wood smoke, damp soil, and animal sweat, and where the promise of a new nation feels very different depending on the colour of your skin. You begin in a country that is still young enough to call itself experimental. The United States is less than a generation old, proud of its revolution, proud of its constitution, proud of its talk of rights. Yet for many Black Americans, that pride arrives like a locked door painted in cheerful colours. The words sound noble. The reality feels cold to the touch. You move through a landscape where slavery is legal in much of the nation and deeply woven into everyday life. In the South, plantation districts spread across tobacco, rice, indigo, and newly expanding cotton regions. In towns and cities, enslaved people cook meals, haul barrels, mend clothing, tend children, load ships, and build the very streets others stroll upon. Even in places where slavery is weaker, it has not vanished cleanly. It lingers in laws, habits, and convenient silences. Republic of Liberty. Yes, very selective liberty. The roads are rough, the house is draughty, and the nights properly dark. You hear frogs by marshes, creaking shutters, distant dogs, and the occasional crack of a whip carrying farther than anyone likes to admit. The smell of ash clings to cabins and kitchens. Wool scratches your skin, mud cakes onto hems and shoes. Everything feels physical in this world. Labour has weight. Hunger has rhythm. Fear has its own timetable. For a Black American in 1800, the first fact of life is that your body may not belong to you. That truth shapes every hour. If you are enslaved, someone else may decide where you wake, what you eat, how long you work, whom you marry, whether your child stays beside you, even what name you answer to. The control is legal, public, and dressed up as order. That is one of the ugliest tricks of the age. Cruelty often arrives wearing a waistcoat, and yet black life is not defined only by white control. It is also shaped by endurance, skill, wit, affection, memory, and private acts of selfhood that survive beneath pressure. In quarters behind large houses, in small cabins near fields, in urban alleys, on wharves, in washyards, and in meeting places hidden from easy view. Black Americans create lives within severe limits. They tell stories, they style hair, they season food, they whisper jokes, they sing, they grieve, they plan. You might imagine the entire nation neatly divided into North and South, free and enslaved, but reality in 1800 is messier. There are free black communities in northern cities and in parts of the Upper South. There are enslaved people in households that claim gentility, and in back-breaking plantation regimes that claim efficiency. Some owners call themselves paternal, which is a very comfortable word for a person who owns another human being. Historians still argue whether certain masters genuinely believe themselves benevolent, or whether such language simply helped them sleep at night. Either way, the enslaved had to live with the consequences. In Virginia and Maryland, slavery has long roots. In the Carolinas and Georgia, plantation labour has already hardened into a brutal system. Farther west, the appetite for land keeps growing, and slavery moves with it. This spread is not accidental. It is tied to profit, politics, and the restless hunger of expansion. Land is taken, forests are cut, fields are opened, and black labour is forced into the centre of it all. At the federal level, the year 1800 stands close to a major change. The importation of enslaved people from abroad will eventually be banned in 1808, but the domestic slave trade is already preparing to grow more important. That means the buying and selling of enslaved people within the United States becomes even more central. Families can be uprooted not because of war or disaster, but because someone wants better cash flow. It is a chillingly tidy arrangement for those making the sales. If you are enslaved on a plantation, the day often starts before sunrise. The air is wet and cool, and the sky barely grey. You rise from a pallet, stiff and under-rested, with the smell of smoke soaked into the room. A baby stirs nearby. Someone coughs. Someone mutters a prayer. Outside, feet begin to move in dirt. Work is coming. Work is always coming. Food is simple and often insufficient. Cornmeal, salt pork when available, molasses, perhaps greens or beans, perhaps fish, perhaps nothing generous at all. Cooking smells warm for a moment, but hunger returns quickly when labour stretches through the day. Clothes are coarse, winters bite through thin fabric. Summers press down like a hand on the back of the neck. In urban areas, life can look different without becoming free. Enslaved black men may work as carpenters, blacksmiths, sailors, coachmen, or dock workers. Enslaved black women may labour as cooks, laundresses, seamstresses, nurses, and market sellers. The noise changes in town. Instead of wind through fields, you hear carts rattling over stone, church bells, hawkers calling, hammers striking metal, horses snorting in narrow streets. The smell changes too. Tar, fish, sweat, sewage, bread, tobacco, and river water all mix together. But control remains. Passes may be required to move. Wages, if earned, often go to the enslaver. The city offers mobility only in carefully measured doses. There are free black Americans too, and their presence unsettles many white observers. A free black person walking with confidence, dressed neatly, conducting business, attending church, owning tools, renting property, or reading a newspaper can seem to challenge the whole story slavery tries to tell. If black people can live as citizens, workers, parents, believers, and thinkers, then what exactly has slavery been claiming all this time? Awkward question. Freedom, though, is often fragile. Free black Americans may carry papers proving their status, because a missing document can turn a normal day into a nightmare. Kidnapping is a real danger. Suspicion is routine. Rights are narrowed by local law. Voting exists in some places for some black men, but the trend is already tightening against them. Free does not mean secure. It means you have slightly more room in a house that is still on fire. Religion holds a complicated place in this world. Some white ministers preach obedience to enslaved congregants, urging patience and submission. Black worshippers, meanwhile, often hear different meanings in the same Bible. Deliverance, justice, exodus, dignity before God, in brush arbours, cabins, churches, or quiet meetings after the formal service ends. Spiritual life becomes a place where grief can be voiced and hope can be practiced. The sound of singing at night carries softly through trees, and even when the words are simple, the feeling is not. It is shelter. One quirky detail from the time sits in the world of style and personal care. Even under harsh conditions, many black Americans took pride in dress whenever possible. Head wraps, carefully arranged hair, polished shoes save for special occasions, and bright scraps transformed into something elegant could all carry meaning. Appearance was not vanity alone, it was presentation, self-respect, and sometimes quiet resistance. A clean collar or well-tied headcloth could say, without saying it, "I am still a person in full." Language and memory travel too, in coastal regions, especially in the Low Country. African cultural influences remain vivid in speech, foodways, music, basket making, and belief. Rice cultivation itself carries African expertise, though white planters are usually delighted to enjoy the profits without acknowledging where the knowledge came from. How convenient. The country often depends on black intelligence while pretending only white people are doing the thinking. Children experience this world intensely. Enslaved children may begin with small tasks, carrying water, minding younger siblings, chasing birds from crops, collecting wood, learning to move carefully around adult moods and sudden commands. Childhood exists, but it is narrowed. Games happen in scraps of time. Affection is precious. Lessons come early. Who is safe? Who is not? When to stay silent? When to run an errand quickly? When to lower your eyes and when not to? For parents, love can be threaded with terror. A child may be promised one thing and sold another. A spouse may be hired out. A mother may watch her child sent to another household. A father may have no legal standing to protect his own family. And still, families form. They form in vows spoken without legal recognition, in hands held after dark, in songs hummed over sleeping children, in names passed down, in recipes remembered, in warnings gently given. News travels by conversation, rumour, sermons, ships, letters overheard, and travellers passing through. Black Americans in 1800 are not sealed off from the wider world. They hear of revolutions, elections, uprisings, church disputes, and changing laws. The Haitian Revolution especially stirs imaginations and fears. To many enslaved and free black people, Haiti can appear as a startling sign that bondage is not eternal. To many white Americans, it appears as a nightmare in motion. Reactions are intense because the implications are obvious. The world is not fixed, it can turn. That possibility makes white authorities nervous, and nervous authorities are rarely famous for calm behaviour. Surveillance increases, restrictions tighten, gatherings are watched, literacy is treated with suspicion in some places, mobility becomes more controlled. Fear of rebellion shapes policy even where no rebellion is underway. It is one of the patterns of the age. Power imagines threats, then punishes people for fitting the picture it invented. Even so, resistance does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is theft of time, a broken tool, a slowed pace, a hidden meeting, a forbidden lesson in reading, a message passed carefully, a route remembered, a refusal to surrender an inner self. Some enslaved people flee when they can, some negotiate, some endure visibly while protecting something invisible. Scholars continue to debate how often small acts of resistance altered plantation productivity, but they agree that refusal existed in countless forms, even when records barely noticed it. By evening, the nation likes to picture itself as orderly. Candles burn in parlours, silver glints on tables, men discuss politics, women pour tea, somewhere a fiddle plays, somewhere a child recites a lesson, somewhere a statesman speaks grandly of the future. Yet behind those scenes stand black hands that lit the fire, cooked the supper, groomed the horse, laundered the shirt, rocked the cradle, raised the tobacco, planted the rice, loaded the cargo, and made the comfort possible. That is what 1800 feels like for black Americans at the broadest level. It is a life lived inside contradiction, a country praising liberty while expanding bondage, a society claiming Christian virtue while trafficking in families, a public world full of speeches, and a private world full of unspoken dependence on black labour, black knowledge, and black endurance. And as night settles over cabins, city rooms, and plantation quarters, you hear the softer sounds take over: crickets in the grass, a door latch, low conversation, a baby breathing, someone humming almost under their breath. The smell of dying embers warms the dark. The boards beneath you are hard. The blanket is thin. The future is uncertain, but life remains stubbornly, quietly present. You close your eyes in a nation that does not yet know how much of itself it has placed in shadow. For black Americans, 1800 is not an abstract year in a textbook. It is the texture of rough cloth, the ache of worn muscles, the caution in every public movement, the tenderness protected in private, and the steady knowledge that survival itself is a kind of defiance. You wake before the sky has properly decided to become morning. The darkness is thin but stubborn, and the air has a damp chill that settles on your skin like a second shirt. Somewhere nearby, a rooster tries to sound important. A child shifts in sleep. Wood cracks softly in a fading fire. The smell of smoke, old straw, and worn cloth hangs close around you, familiar and inescapable. In 1800, the day begins early for nearly everyone, but not equally. That is one of the first things you notice when you look closely at the morning. White households rise into a day arranged around their comfort, however modest or grand that comfort may be. Black Americans, especially those who are enslaved, rise into a day arranged around obligation. Even the light seems to fall differently on the two worlds. If you are enslaved in the countryside, the morning often starts with a movement before speech. Feet find the floor, hands reach for clothing, faces are washed quickly, sometimes with cold water that stings the eyes and wakes the whole body at once. There is no gentle stretching by the window and no lazy pause to decide what the day might hold. The day has already been decided. Women may begin by stirring embers, setting kettles, and preparing food that must feed many mouths with very little generosity. Men may head towards stables, fields, workshops, or wagons. Older children are useful almost immediately. Younger ones cling for a moment before being carried, hushed, or handed off to another pair of tired arms. The routine has the feel of a system repeated so many times that it becomes muscle memory. If you are in a town or port city, the morning noise arrives faster. Wheels strike stone, horses stamp in narrow yards. A fish seller calls out to the street. Someone bangs open a shop shutter. The smell of wet rope, chimney soot, bread, river water, and dung drifts together in a way that no one can convincingly describe as fresh. Urban life in 1800 is lively, but it is not gentle. For Black Americans, it can be full of motion without much freedom. In many homes, the enslaved servants are expected to appear before the household seems to need them. Breakfast must emerge as if by magic. Clothes must be brushed, water must be fetched, fires must be built or revived, chamber pots must be emptied, which is not anyone's dream occupation. Though history politely leaves such details in the corner and pretends the house somehow cleaned itself, it did not. Someone handled everything, usually someone black. The difference between house labour and field labour is real, but neither is easy. Domestic work can appear less brutal to outside eyes because it happens indoors, closer to polished furniture and guarded manners, yet it often demands constant scrutiny, endless availability, and a strange intimacy with people who hold absolute power over you. You are near conversation, but not part of it. You hear laughter at the table while standing just behind it. You know private family habits, tempers, illnesses, and secrets, yet remain denied your own privacy in return. Field labour begins with the land itself. Soil clings to shoes and hems. Dew wets ankles and cuffs. Tools feel cold in the hand before sunrise and hot by noon. Depending on the region, the work might involve tobacco, rice, indigo, corn, livestock, or the early spread of cotton. Each crop has its own demands. Rice plantations in the coastal south are infamous for disease and exhausting conditions. Tobacco drains the earth and the body together. Cotton in 1800 is not yet king everywhere, but it is rising fast enough to change lives and landscapes. The body learns the pace because it has no choice. Bend, lift, carry, cut, tie, turn, repeat. The soundscape becomes part of the experience. Insects hum, wind moves through leaves, tools knock against wood. A distant overseer calls out. Somewhere a mule snorts and shakes harness bells. Time is measured not by clocks for many workers, but by light, weather, and command. Free Black Americans wake differently, but never in pure ease. In northern cities such as Philadelphia, New York, or Boston, a free black artisan, labourer, sailor, washerwoman, or vendor may begin the day with greater control over movement and family life. Yet freedom in 1800 still comes wrapped in caution. Papers may need to be carried. Employers may cheat wages. White neighbours may resent your presence. A simple walk to work can involve careful self-presentation, because respectability is expected and never fully rewarded. Clothing matters for this reason. A clean shirt, a brushed coat, a neatly tied headscarf, or well-kept shoes can help announce dignity in a society eager to deny it. Fabric is expensive, laundering is laborious, and repairs are constant. Needles and thread become tools of survival. People remake garments, trade cast-offs, patch elbows, turn collars, and preserve one good outfit for church or special visits. The rustle of starched cloth can feel almost ceremonial when daily life is so rough. Breakfast is shaped by class, region, and status. For many enslaved people, it is quick and plain, often cornmeal or leftovers, eaten fast before work claims the morning. In households with more resources, you may smell coffee, fried meat, bread, or porridge intended for the family first and the workers second. Free black households with modest means still try to build routine around shared meals when possible. A bowl passed from hand to hand may not be abundant, but it creates a small centre of belonging before the world begins demanding performance. Once outside, you notice how divided public space feels. Streets, markets, docks, churches, courthouses, and taverns are not only physical places, they are stages where race is constantly read and enforced. A white man walking briskly across a square may look like a citizen going about his business. A black man doing the same may be challenged, questioned, watched, or expected to explain himself. A white woman entering a shop may be greeted as a customer. A black woman may be assessed first as servant, threat, curiosity, or inconvenience. This daily reading of the body becomes exhausting. It shapes posture, speech, and pace. You learn where to stand and when not to. You learn how long eye contact can last before becoming dangerous. You learn which tone sounds respectful enough to calm suspicion without sounding weak. Such knowledge is never officially taught, but everyone understands the lesson. Markets are some of the busiest places in this world. They smell of apples, onions, mud, cheese, fish, poultry, leather, and sweat. Voices rise and overlap in bargaining, gossip, complaints, and greetings. Black women are especially visible in many local economies as sellers of produce, cooked food, or small goods. Some are enslaved and required to return earnings to an owner. Others are free and using market work to support a household. The market can offer a rare kind of public presence. It can also bring harassment, surveillance, and competition sharpened by prejudice. One curious detail from the period appears in the urban food trade. In some cities, black vendors became known for specific dishes or street sales, creating reputations that locals recognized. Hot pies, oysters, fruit, baked goods, and prepared meals could be part of this world. The work was hard and profits uncertain, but it showed how black expertise helped feed the city in ways often praised by customers and ignored by official history. People remember the taste more easily than the person who made it. Church life reveals another divide. Sunday may appear calmer on the surface, yet even sacred space reflects hierarchy. In some congregations, black worshippers sit in separate galleries or designated areas, their physical placement spelling out the moral failures of the age more clearly than any sermon could. In response, independent black churches and mutual aid circles begin to emerge with increasing importance. Worship in these settings carries the warmth of self-direction, the sound of voices that do not need permission to rise, and the relief of being fully present among one another. Water is part of daily life in ways modern people often forget. It must be hauled, heated, carried, spilled, replaced. Laundry is a whole physical event, not a background task. Hands redden in basins, soap leaves skin rough, wet linen grows heavy, in yards and riverbanks. The slapping rhythm of cloth against boards becomes common music. Black women are central to this labour in countless households, and the work is relentless. Cleanliness in elite homes often depends on the exhausted hands of women whose own comfort is treated as optional. Children move through this divided day with astonishing alertness. Enslaved children may carry messages between house and fields, fetch eggs, bring water, fan insects away, or rock babies in their arms before they are old enough to understand the whole shape of the system around them. Free black children may attend school in rare circumstances, learn a trade from a parent, or help with domestic and street labour. Either way, childhood often includes responsibility early and innocence in narrow supply. Education exists unevenly. Some free black communities place deep value on literacy and create ways to teach despite barriers. Reading is power, memory, and possibility. For enslaved people, literacy can be restricted or feared by enslavers, because written knowledge opens doors to communication, religion, travel, and thought beyond control. Historians continue to disagree over how widespread secret reading instruction was in 1800, largely because the evidence hides in fragments and oral memory. What is certain is that the desire to learn was strong, and fear of that desire was equally strong among those in power. Afternoon brings heat in warmer months and fatigue in every season. Bodies slow, though tasks rarely do. Sweat gathers at the neck and lower back. Flies become unbearable. Hands cramp. In city kitchens, the air grows thick with steam and roasting smells. In workshops, metal, wood shavings, glue, and oil create their own sharp atmosphere. On docks, ropes burn the palms and barrels bruise the shoulder. Labour marks the body not only through exhaustion, but through texture, calluses, scars, bent posture, swollen joints. The body keeps a record long after the day ends. Still, within these hard routines, moments of choice survive. A mother braids her daughter's hair in a careful pattern. A man hums under his breath while sharpening a blade. Friends exchange a look that contains both humour and warning. Someone saves a better piece of food for someone weaker. Someone straightens their back after an insult and refuses to let the insult settle inside. These are small things. They are not small at all. Evening changes the mood of the world. The sun lowers, and the edges of buildings soften. Birds quiet down. Smoke rises from cook fires. Supper, however meagre, becomes the centre of attention. In enslaved quarters, this may be the only stretch of the day with limited time that feels partly your own. People cook, mend, speak, and gather what comfort they can from one another. In free black homes, evenings might hold sewing, reading aloud, neighbourhood visits, prayer, or plans for work tomorrow. The room may be cramped and the candle expensive, but the atmosphere can briefly belong to those inside it. Night also carries risk. Patrols move in some regions. Curfews shape movement. Darkness hides and protects in unequal measure. For white households, night may mean rest secured by locks, custom, and law. For black Americans, night can bring relief from labour but not from vulnerability. A knock at the door after dark rarely feels promising. By the time you lie down, your senses are full of the day. Smoke in your hair, soap dried on your hands, dust in your throat, aching legs. The last sounds might be quiet talk, insects outside, a spoon against a bowl, or the low murmur of prayer. In 1800, daily life for black Americans is built from these repeated hours, not only from public laws and dramatic events. Morning to night, the day itself is divided ground. And yet across that ground, people keep making life. They cook with care, dress with intention, labour with skill, worship with depth, love their children, and guard private hopes in a society determined to press those hopes flat. That is the texture of the ordinary, not empty routine, but human persistence under constant watch. By the time the sun is fully up, work has already taken hold of the day. It sits on your shoulders before breakfast settles, before the dew dries, before your hands have fully loosened from sleep. In 1800, black labour is everywhere in America, so common that many white people barely seem to notice it unless it pauses. That is one of the strangest habits of the age. A nation can depend on your work every hour and still act surprised that you're human. If you are enslaved, your labour is not simply expected, it is owned. That fact changes the feeling of every task. The same movement that might be called industry in one person becomes compulsion in another. A skilled hand does not guarantee respect. An exhausted body does not guarantee mercy. You work because refusal brings punishment, and even excellent work rarely brings security. In the countryside, labour follows the crop on tobacco land. The work is repetitive and demanding, from planting to tending to cutting and curing. Tobacco is a greedy plant, hard on the soil and hard on the body. You bend often, lift constantly, and move through rows under weather that never seems to pick a reasonable setting. If rain comes, you're soaked. If heat arrives, it presses down on your skull and back until the whole field seems to shimmer. In rice country, the danger has its own character. wet ground, insects, standing water, and disease shape the day. Rice cultivation requires specialized knowledge, much of it rooted in African agricultural traditions that planters profit from while pretending the intelligence comes with the land itself. It does not. Human beings brought that skill. Human beings were forced to use it. The swamp does not care about political speeches. It only cares whether your legs keep moving. In the Upper South, mixed labour systems mean you may be shifted from one task to another with little warning. 1 hour you are fencing a field, another you are splitting wood, hauling water, or mending tools. Some enslaved men work as teamsters, mill hands, sawyers, coopers, or stable workers. Some enslaved women move between field labour and domestic labour depending on season, household need, or the whims of those in charge. Work does not sit neatly in categories when the point is to extract as much usefulness from you as possible. In growing towns and ports, the labour looks different but remains relentless. Black men unload ships, roll barrels, carry crates, sweep warehouses, repair carts, mix mortar, saw lumber, and navigate crowded wharves where every surface feels damp, splintered, or greasy. The air smells of river water, tar, fish, spices, smoke, and rot. The noise is nearly constant. Ropes slap wood, gulls cry overhead, men shout instructions no one can fully hear the first time. A dropped cask can smash a foot as easily as a plate. Urban enslaved labour sometimes allows a little more movement than plantation life, but movement is not freedom. A hired-out worker may go across town for a task, interact with free black residents, hear political talk in the street, and handle money temporarily. Yet all of it remains under someone else's claim. Even skill can become another chain. A talented carpenter, blacksmith, or mason may be valued highly because his labour brings profit, which means his owner has more reason to control him tightly. Skill among black workers in 1800 is far more widespread than many older histories admitted. Enslaved artisans build furniture, forge iron, make bricks, repair shoes, tan leather, and construct houses. Enslaved women produce textiles, preserve food, brew remedies, nurse children, and manage complex household tasks that require timing, memory, and judgment. White households and businesses rely on this expertise every day, while speaking as if black Americans contribute only muscle. The record of the period says otherwise if you bother to read it carefully and without excuses. Domestic labour has its own exhausting choreography. In kitchens, the heat can become almost unbearable. Open hearth cooking demands attention to flame, timing, smoke, heavy pots, and scarce ingredients. Ash settles everywhere. Grease spatters. Bread must not burn, meat must not spoil, water must be carried in and waste carried out. In wealthier homes, meals may appear elegant on the table, but elegance is only the final layer. Beneath it lie hours of chopping, stirring, skimming, lifting, scrubbing, and cleaning by hands rarely thanked and often watched. A cook in 1800 is not merely following recipes. She's managing fire, storage, supply, timing, and the temper of a household. She knows who prefers what, which child is ill, when flour is running low, how to stretch food without obvious complaint, and how to rescue a meal when an ingredient is missing. This knowledge is power of a kind, though not the kind the law respects. The house may run on her judgment while pretending it runs on the master's authority. Laundry is another world of labour. Sheets, shirts, aprons, shifts, stockings, towels, tablecloths, baby cloths, work garments, formal garments. The pile never ends. Water must be heated, soap made or stretched, stains scrubbed, cloth wrung out, lines managed, irons heated. Your shoulders ache, your fingers chap and split. Steam fills the room, fabric grows heavy as wet rope. Clean linen, that proud symbol of refinement, is often the result of black women's backs and wrists paying the price. Children work too, though adults of the time often soften the truth with words like helping or learning. Enslaved children chase chickens from gardens, fetch water, gather kindling, fan flies from tables, watch toddlers, card wool, or carry food to workers in the field. Some begin with light tasks and are pushed into harder ones as they grow. Childhood exists in pockets, but labour crowds it from all sides. A game can be interrupted by a command. A laugh can vanish at the sound of footsteps. Free black Americans also work under pressure. Though the nature of that pressure shifts, a free black sailor may face dangerous conditions at sea and discrimination on shore. A free black washerwoman may depend on white clients who underpay her while expecting perfect service. A free black barber, carpenter, or labourer may build a reputation through discipline and skill while still being excluded from guilds, better wages, or civic respect. Freedom allows effort to benefit your own household more directly, but effort still moves through a world built to limit where that household can rise. One lesser-known feature of the time is the prominence of black watermen, boatmen, and dock workers in some regions. Rivers are the highways of early America, and the men who move goods along them possess practical knowledge of currents, weather, cargo handling, and dangerous crossings. Their labour is physically demanding, but it also places them close to news, movement, and exchange. The river carries barrels and gossip together, and both can matter more than people realise. The body records these workdays with brutal honesty. Palms harden, knees throb, necks burn from sun, shoulders knot from lifting, smoke stings the eyes, feet swell in coarse shoes or go bare and sore on packed earth. Some injuries come suddenly from falling loads, sharp tools, animal kicks, or machinery in mills. Others build slowly through overuse. A back bent at 20 can feel old at 30. The labour system does not pause for aches unless they threaten production. Pain becomes part of the weather. Food is tied closely to work, because labour without calories weakens quickly. Yet meals for enslaved people are often insufficient or monotonous. Cornmeal, bacon, salted fish, peas, greens, molasses, perhaps garden produce if space allows. In some places, enslaved people supplement rations by fishing, trapping, tending small plots, or gathering wild foods when permitted. That private production can become important, not only for survival, but for dignity. To grow your own onions or cabbage, to season a stew your own way, to feed your child from your own patch of earth, is a modest act that feels larger than it looks. Time itself belongs unequally to different people. This may be the most tiring truth of all. A wealthy white man may speak of industry while directing others. A modest white farmer may labour hard alongside his family, yet still possess legal control over his own time at day's end. An enslaved person may be denied even the right to decide when rest begins. On some plantations and in some households, nighttime tasks continue after dark. Clothes must still be mended, tools repaired, babies soothed, food prepared for the next dawn, and still, within labour, social life happens. Workers exchange quick remarks in the field. Women in a washyard share news and private warnings. Men in a workshop trade practical knowledge that can sharpen both craft and caution. At a dock, someone hears of an opening on a ship, a new law, a cruel owner, a family separation, a rumour of sale, a preacher passing through, a price rising, a patrol growing stricter. Work sites become places where information travels through effort, not around it. Historians still debate how much autonomy some enslaved skilled workers could negotiate through the value of their labour. In certain cases, artisans appear to have had some leverage, perhaps earning small sums, handling tools independently, or moving through town with less direct oversight. But there is no romantic version of this. Any apparent room remained insecure, revocable, and enclosed by ownership. To have skills under slavery is useful. It is not liberation. The emotional burden of work can be as heavy as the physical burden. To labour in a house where the owners dine on your effort and discuss you as property requires a kind of daily swallowing of anger. To tend a crop that enriches someone who can sell your child is another kind of wound. To work brilliantly and know the brilliance will be claimed by another person creates a bitterness that records from the period only partly capture. The silence around it can be misleading. Silence is not agreement. Often it is strategy. Sometimes labour itself becomes a language of resistance. A tool goes missing. A pace slows just enough to matter. A worker claims not to know what he clearly knows. A woman keeps back a little food. A message is passed in the ordinary motion of a task. A meeting is arranged under the cover of an errand. None of this destroys the system, but it complicates it. The enslaved are never merely passive instruments. They think constantly, evaluate constantly, and act within the narrowest spaces with remarkable care. When evening finally approaches, the shift in sound is unmistakable. Hammers quiet. Hooves soften on the road. The field empties by degrees. Kitchen fires move from frantic to steady. The light changes from blunt brightness to a warmer gold that makes even rough boards look gentler than they are. But the body does not mistake beauty for relief. It knows exactly what it has spent. You wash when you can. You sit when you can. You stretch sore fingers. Rub your neck. Lower yourself slowly onto a stool. A step. A pallet. Whatever is available. Supper comes, and the smell of it, however plain, has deep comfort because it means the working hours have loosened their grip for a little while. People speak more freely now, though never without care. A joke slips out. Someone sings a line. Someone lists the tasks for tomorrow with a dry humour that keeps despair from getting too comfortable. This is what it means to say that black labour powered America in 1800. It is not only an economic statement, though it is certainly that. It is a daily fact of breath, muscle, memory, and skill. Fields, kitchens, workshops, roads, docks, stables, laundries, nurseries, and parlours all bear the mark of black work. The comfort of others rests on it. The growth of the nation rests on it. Even the fantasy some white Americans hold of their own independence often rests on being served by people denied independence entirely. As the night deepens, the tools are set down, at least for now. Smoke thins in the air. The skin cools. The worst soreness begins to bloom. Your body hums with the aftershock of the day. Yet beneath the fatigue, another truth remains. Labour in 1800 is a means of exploitation, but it is also proof of ability no ideology can erase. Black Americans are not simply made to work. They know how to build, cook, heal, plant, mend, carry, shape, solve, and endure. The country uses those gifts while refusing to honour them. That is its shame, not theirs. Love survives in small rooms, in crowded quarters, in borrowed moments, and under laws that do not respect it. In 1800, for black Americans, family life can be tender, strong, funny, disciplined, and deeply loving. Yet it must live under pressures that would strain any human bond. You feel that truth most sharply at home, because home is never only a place. It is also the people you are afraid to lose. If you are enslaved, the law does not protect your marriage in any secure way. A husband and wife may choose one another, vow themselves to one another, live as a couple for years, raise children together, and still remain vulnerable to sale, debt settlement, inheritance division, or the casual decision of an owner who values bookkeeping more than attachment. The intimacy is real. The legal standing is not. This is one of the quiet brutalities of slavery. It does not merely exploit labour, it interferes with belonging. A family might live together on one plantation or in one town household for a season, a decade, or a lifetime. But certainty is rare. An owner dies, property is inventoried, land is sold, children are divided among heirs like furniture with opinions. The language of estate management is chilling in its calmness. It can turn a mother into an asset and a son into a line item. You do not need shouting for a system to be cruel. Sometimes neat handwriting does the work. And still, people build families anyway. That decision itself is a mark of courage. A man walks after dark to visit a wife on a nearby property, carrying the weight of distance and the risk of punishment. A woman saves part of her meal for a child who worked too hard that day. Grandparents pass on names, habits, warnings, and old songs. Siblings form strong alliances early, knowing that brothers and sisters may be the most dependable witnesses to one another's lives. The house or cabin where you sleep may be small, smoky, drafty, and overcrowded. But within that space, family culture grows. A parent teaches a child how to hold a spoon properly, how to sweep a floor, how to avoid an angry overseer's path, how to listen more carefully than others speak. Bedtime may come with whispered stories or prayers. Hair is braided with steady fingers. Torn clothes are patched by candlelight. Someone laughs at an old joke that still works because it belongs to the family and not to the outside world. For enslaved mothers, motherhood can feel both sacred and precarious. You nourish, protect, correct, and comfort your children while knowing that your ability to keep them close is not guaranteed. Every sickness carries extra fear. Every change in household fortune can sound dangerous. Every rumour of sale lands hard in the stomach. The bond between mother and child is powerful enough that slaveholders often try to exploit it, using threats of separation to enforce obedience. It is difficult to imagine a crueler pressure than that. Fathers face their own painful constraints. Some are present daily, some visit across distance when owners permit, some are hired out, some sold away, some forced into helplessness before their own children. Yet fatherhood remains real in practice even when denied in law. Men teach sons to fish, mend, plant, carve, walk carefully, and judge character. They soothe frightened children, discipline teenagers, and try to model steadiness in a world designed to strip that steadiness away. Records from the period often notice black fathers least, but lived experience would have noticed them far more. Grandmothers can become anchors of household memory. Their hands know herbs, remedies, recipes, births, burials, and kinship lines. They remember who belonged to whom, who came from which place, who had the singing voice, who laughed like their uncle, who should never trust a certain man no matter how polite he sounds. In communities where written records are denied or distorted, older women often keep history alive through voice and repetition. Family memory becomes an archive stored in people. Children grow up inside this atmosphere of affection and danger. They learn to recognize adults by footsteps and mood. They know when to play quietly and when to disappear from the center of a room. They learn that some questions should be asked only in private. Yet they also know warmth. They are bounced on knees, teased affectionately, chased in short games, and held when storms frighten them. Childhood is constrained, but it is not empty. There is also heartbreak built into the ordinary. Infancy and childhood mortality are high in this era for everyone, and harsh conditions make loss especially common among the poor and the enslaved. A fever can rise fast, a cough can deepen, a small body can fade with terrifying speed. The house falls quiet except for prayer, sobbing, or stunned silence. People in 1800 are familiar with death, but familiarity does not lessen grief. It only teaches you how to carry it while continuing to wake up. Naming practices carry deep emotional significance. A child may be named after a parent, grandparent, biblical figure, admired elder, or lost family member. Names can preserve connection across separation. They can also express hope. Some families use names repeatedly, not from lack of imagination, but from devotion to continuity. One scholarly question still debated is how much naming traditions in Black American communities directly preserved specific African patterns versus adapting to local Christian and English naming customs. The answer likely varies by region and family, but the emotional function remains clear. Naming helps hold people together. Marriage among enslaved people often takes place without legal ceremony, though some couples do seek church recognition or private blessing when possible. A broom-jumping ritual is sometimes mentioned in later memory, though historians continue to dispute how widespread and regionally consistent that practice truly was in 1800. What is certain is that commitment existed regardless of white approval. Couples marked their unions in ways that made sense to them, and community recognition often mattered more than legal acknowledgement from a state built on exclusion. Courtship, when it happens, unfolds within strict limits. A young man may need permission to visit. A young woman may have almost no private space. Conversations happen during shared work, after worship, near a well, at a holiday gathering, or on a path between quarters. Attraction still finds its ways. So does flirtation, a careful compliment, a shared grin over something absurd, a small gift, perhaps a ribbon, a carved token, or a little food. Human affection remains inventive even in cramped circumstances. Among free Black Americans, Family life is somewhat more protected, but never free from outside pressure. A free couple may marry legally in some places, maintain a stable home, and raise children with greater control over household decisions. Yet racist laws, economic precarity, and the threat of kidnapping cast long shadows. A father may work exhausting hours because ownership of his labour finally supports his own children, only to find that housing is poor, schools are limited, and the law still doubts his equal humanity. Freedom is meaningful, it is not magical. Mutual aid grows naturally from these conditions. Families do not stand alone if they can help it. Neighbours mind children, share food, lend tools, pass on cast-off clothing, and care for the sick. In free black communities especially, churches and benevolent networks become central to survival. But mutual aid exists among the enslaved too, often through informal systems of support. One woman helps at a birth, another sits with a sick elder, a man repairs a stool for a widow, a teenage girl keeps watch over younger children while adults finish labour. These acts are domestic, practical, and quietly heroic. Food binds family life together whenever possible. Meals may be plain, but they create rhythm. A pot shared at the end of the day can become one of the few moments when people speak more fully. Seasonings and techniques carry memory across generations. Okra, greens, rice dishes, stews, smoked flavours, roasted roots, and carefully stretched scraps all reflect adaptation and knowledge. In some places, family recipes preserve traces of African influence blended with native, European, and local ingredients. The meal is not only nourishment, it is instruction and identity. One lesser-known detail from family life in this period appears in the making of toys and keepsakes. Children often play with handmade objects, small carved animals, rag dolls, string games, or improvised amusements from whatever materials are available. These things may seem modest, but they reveal something important. Adults still make beauty and play for children even when exhausted. A carved whistle or a stitched doll says that joy is worth effort, even in hard times. Discipline inside black families is shaped by difficult realities. Parents may be strict not from coldness, but from fear. A child who speaks boldly in the wrong place could invite punishment. A teenager who wanders too far could be accused of theft or insubordination. Lessons about posture, tone, and manners, and caution are often survival lessons. Love is sometimes delivered through warning because the world is dangerous enough without softness, becoming carelessness. Separation remains the darkest threat. Sale can fall suddenly or hang for months as rumour. A child hears adults talking low after supper. A mother goes quiet. A father stares at the floor longer than usual. Then one morning strangers arrive or someone is told to pack. The scene might be loud with pleading or numb with shock. Either way, it tears into the structure of family life. Some separations last forever. Some relatives search for years through rumour, travel, letters dictated to others, or chance meetings at markets and churches. Families become scattered maps carried in the mind. White observers of the time often misread black family life badly, sometimes deliberately. They may describe enslaved households as unstable, without admitting that slavery itself created the instability. They may mistake poverty for lack of feeling, or communal childcare for weak parental attachment, when the opposite is often true. Black families survive not because conditions are easy, but because bonds are worked at fiercely. The strength is in the maintenance. Even joy has a place here. Weddings, births, naming celebrations, harvest gatherings, Sunday visits, and evenings with music offer moments of release. Laughter can rise suddenly and fill a room. Dancing loosens the body after hard labour. A baby learning to walk becomes everyone's delight for a few minutes. A courting couple teases each other. Someone tells a story so dramatically that even the most tired listener smiles. These moments matter because they are not escapes from life, they are life. As darkness settles, family spaces become more intimate. Firelight softens faces. The younger children drift towards sleep. Older children whisper a little longer. A mother smooths a blanket. A father checks the latch or sits listening for footsteps outside. In that dimness, relationships feel both fragile and very strong. Fragile because the larger world can intrude at any time. strong because those inside have built trust with such care. This is what family means for Black Americans in 1800. It is not guaranteed by law, property, or public respect. It is made through daily labor of devotion, feeding, teaching, protecting, remembering, grieving, joking, mending, holding. A family may have little formal protection and still possess deep moral structure. It may live in fear and still produce tenderness. It may be threatened constantly and still insist on love. When you lie down near the people you call yours, the air warm with smoke and breath, you understand something essential about this world. Slavery spreads across America not only by taking labor, but by trying to control kinship itself, yet again and again. Black Americans answer that assault by forming families, keeping families, and mourning families with a seriousness no legal code can erase. Their bonds are not weaker because the law ignores them. In many cases, they are stronger because they must be defended every single day. Freedom in 1800 is real, but it is narrow, conditional, and often exhausted by the time it reaches Black Americans. If you are free, you do not wake under direct ownership, and that difference matters deeply. You can choose some parts of your day, protect your earnings more fully, and keep your family with greater legal standing in certain places. Yet freedom comes fenced with papers, curfews, suspicion, and the constant need to prove what should not need proving at all. You are free, yes. Everyone insists on reminding you how limited that freedom is. In northern cities, free Black communities are growing, especially in places like Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and Newport. In parts of the Upper South, free Black populations also exist, though often under even tighter scrutiny. Some people were born free, some purchased their freedom, some were manumitted by owners through will, private agreement, or religious conviction. A few gained freedom through military service in earlier wars or through legal technicalities. However it came, freedom is not a doorway into ease. It is the beginning of another kind of vigilance. The first thing you notice is paperwork. Papers matter constantly. Certificates of freedom, manumission documents, tax records, apprenticeship papers, letters of reference, church records. Any scrap that can help prove you're not enslaved may need to be carried, protected, and produced on demand. A white stranger can question your status. A local official can stop you. A constable can ask where you're going and why. Lose the paper and the whole day can tilt toward disaster. This dependence on documentation creates a strange emotional burden. Your own life becomes something you must carry in folded form. A crease in the paper can feel like a crease in your nerves. Rain is a problem. Fire is a problem. Theft is a problem. Carelessness is not an option. The law often treats your freedom less as a right than as a claim you must repeatedly perform. Work for free Black Americans is essential and unstable. Many labour as sailors, teamsters, barbers, laundresses, cooks, coopers, dock workers, day labourers, servants, seamstresses, and artisans. Some establish small businesses. A few acquire property or achieve moderate financial security, but prejudice shapes every opportunity. White employers may pay less, delay wages, or reserve better positions for poorer qualified white workers. Customers may praise your skill and still refuse fair treatment. Economic life becomes a test of endurance with extra penalties attached. Still, free Black communities develop impressive systems of discipline and mutual support. Churches, friendly societies, burial associations, neighbourhood networks, and informal circles of aid become central. These institutions help people find work, care for the sick, bury the dead, support widows, educate children, and defend the vulnerable. They also provide moral structure. Respectability becomes both sincere value and necessary armour. Clean dress, careful speech, regular church attendance, sobriety, thrift, and industriousness are emphasized not only because they are admirable, but because every public mistake can be used to confirm racist assumptions. The pressure to be exemplary is intense. A white man can be ordinary, sloppy, foolish, or rude and still remain an individual. A free Black person is often treated as a representative specimen. Your conduct is read as evidence for or against an entire race. It is a deeply unfair arrangement, and everyone involved understands it even when they pretend otherwise. You feel watched in ways that shape how you walk into a room, how you answer a question, and how loudly you allow yourself to laugh. Housing reflects these limits. Many free black families live in poorer districts, crowded alleys, edge neighborhoods, or rented rooms that offer little comfort but some possibility of community. The streets may be muddy, the wells inconvenient, the air thick with kitchen smoke and waste. Rooms are often small, ceilings low, and walls thin enough that neighbours' arguments and babies seem half your own. Yet within these spaces people build homes with order and care. A table is scrubbed, a candle is saved, a blanket is folded neatly. Pride often survives where comfort does not. Education is one of the most important goals for many free black families. Literacy offers religious understanding, economic advantage, civic identity, and a way to resist deliberate ignorance imposed from outside. Schools are unevenly available, often underfunded, sometimes segregated and frequently opposed. Some children learn through churches, benevolent organizations, or private instruction. Some are taught at home by parents or elders. Books are scarce, slates are reused, and lessons are precious. A child sounding out words by dim candlelight can carry the weight of a whole family's hope. One of the best-known free black leaders around this time is Richard Allen in Philadelphia, a former enslaved man who became a minister and helped build independent black religious institutions. His work matters because it shows how free black Americans were not merely surviving. They were organizing, preaching, raising funds, buying land, and shaping public life in ways that challenged exclusion. The growth of black churches in this period is not just a religious story. It is a civic one. Churches provide more than sermons. They offer meeting space, social discipline, education, mutual aid, and a sense of dignity denied elsewhere. To sit among people who know your name, your family, and your worth has a power difficult to exaggerate. The room may be simple, the benches rough, the windows drafty, but the atmosphere feels different from the street. Here, black voices lead. Black grief is understood without translation. Black hope is spoken aloud. Yet even in northern cities where slavery is weakening through gradual emancipation laws, racism hardens in other ways. White workers fear competition. Local leaders worry about public order. Newspapers trade in insult and anxiety. Voting rights for black men exist in some places and are threatened in others. Public accommodations may be discriminatory even when not formally segregated. A free black person can contribute to the city daily and still be denied the most basic presumption of equal belonging. In the South, freedom can be even more precarious. Free black people may own tools, livestock, or small plots. Some work independently as craftsmen or market sellers. Some rent property or live near enslaved relatives. But Southern lawmakers and local whites often see free black populations as dangerous examples. Restrictions accumulate. Travel may require permission. Residency rules tighten. Certain occupations may be limited. The law treats free black existence as a problem to be managed rather than a fact to be respected. One little noticed detail of free black life in this era is the importance of maritime work. Sailors move between ports, hear news from distant places, and encounter wider Atlantic currents of politics and culture. For free black men, the sea can offer wages and mobility unavailable on land, though not safety. Ships are dangerous, discipline is harsh, and ports can be hostile. Still, maritime life connects black Americans to a larger world. News of Haiti, London, the Caribbean, and other American cities travels with sailors long before newspapers make it common. That wider awareness matters. Free black communities are not isolated pockets only thinking about local rent or next week's wash. They are alive to broader ideas of freedom, religion, education, colonization schemes, anti-slavery activism, and racial uplift. Conversations happen in churches, barbershops, homes, and waterfronts. Some advocate patience and respectable advancement. Others burn more urgently with criticism of white hypocrisy. Historians still debate how widespread formal political discussion was among ordinary free black working people in 1800, but the evidence suggests that awareness of public affairs ran deeper than many white observers assumed. Kidnapping remains one of the most frightening dangers. A free black child or adult can be seized, especially in regions close to slaveholding areas, and sold into slavery with terrifying speed. This threat is not imagined. It shapes parental caution, travel decisions, and community vigilance. Strangers are watched, children are warned not to wander, documents are guarded carefully. The line between freedom and slavery can be brutally thin when the surrounding society profits from confusion. Women experience freedom through a particular mix of opportunity and vulnerability. Free black women often support households through washing, sewing, domestic service, nursing, food vending, or small trade. Their labour can sustain entire families, but it exposes them to harassment, exploitation, and chronic insecurity. Respectability is especially demanded of them. They must appear industrious but not assertive, modest but capable, presentable without seeming presumptuous. It is a narrow walkway, and the crowd below is eager for a misstep. Men confront their own pressures. A free black man is expected to provide, protect, and navigate public hostility, while opportunities remain restricted. Masculine dignity is hard to maintain in a society determined to call you boy, servant, or suspect. Some men answer this through careful dress, disciplined work, church leadership, or property holding. Some through skilled trade, some through military memory or fraternal association. The goal is often the same: to stand upright in a world constantly trying to bend you. There is humour here too, because people do not live on caution alone. Neighbours gossip, children play, young adults court each other after services or on streets that briefly feel festive. Someone tells a story so sharply that everyone nearby tries not to laugh too loudly. A barber may listen to half the city's secrets while trimming a customer. A cook might quietly judge a household's entire moral character by its pantry. Human wit survives where law does not help. Clothing can become a visible statement of freedom. A good hat, polished boots, a fitted coat, a well-tied head wrap, or a clean apron may seem ordinary, but they matter deeply. Dress signals order, competence, and self-possession. Some white observers react with ridicule or irritation when black people dress well, as though dignity itself were an offence. That reaction reveals more about the observer than the wearer. Looking respectable is not vanity. It is often strategy and self-respect woven together. Burial traditions and funeral support show another side of community life, because public institutions often fail them. Free black communities organise to care for the dead with proper ceremony. This matters profoundly. To bury someone with prayer, procession, and community witness is to reject the degrading logic that black lives are disposable. In an era obsessed with hierarchy, even mourning becomes a declaration of personhood. By night, after work and public caution, home regains some of its warmth. A child recites letters, a mother mends a shirt, a father totals coins or worries over them. Neighbours stop in with news. Someone reads aloud if they can. Someone sings softly. The smells are humble but comforting. Stew, soap, lamp oil, wool warming near the fire. Outside, the street may still feel unwelcoming. Inside, the room can become a small republic of care. Freedom in 1800 is therefore both precious and exhausting for black Americans. It allows family life to root more securely, labour to benefit your own household, worship to grow independently, and education to become a real pursuit. Yet every gain must be defended. Every public movement passes through suspicion. The state records you. White society watches you. The threat of violence or theft never quite disappears. Even so, free black Americans keep building institutions, reputations, businesses, schools, and congregations. They create habits of discipline not because they accept the rules imposed on them, but because they intend to outlast them. They make room for one another in a country determined to narrow every doorway. That is what freedom looks like here. Not ease, not equality, but a hard-won space in which life, faith, and ambition can still gather and stand, When the day grows quieter and the eyes of authority soften a little with distance or darkness, another world begins to breathe. It is not a separate world exactly, because it exists inside the same towns, fields, kitchens, and roads. But it feels different. The sounds change, the pace changes, the spirit changes. For Black Americans in 1800, Faith Asayun, song, and shared ritual offer something that labour and law cannot give. They offer interior room. Religion is everywhere in early America. Church bells ring over cities. Travelling ministers move through the countryside. Families read scripture by candlelight if they can read at all. Public language is full of providence, sin, salvation, and judgment. But Black Americans do not simply receive religion as it is handed down. They reshape it, interpret it, test it against experience, and make it answer deeper needs than the surrounding society often understands. If you are enslaved, religion can reach you through many channels. An owner may require attendance at a white lady service, or obedience is emphasized with suspicious enthusiasm. A missionary may preach to enslaved listeners with genuine zeal, yet limited imagination about what freedom means on earth. A neighbor may repeat Bible passages from memory. An elder may speak of God in the cabin after dark with a different warmth than anything heard from the pulpit. Scripture is not one thing because people do not hear it the same way. White religious instruction often centers on submission. Servants, obey your masters. Endure suffering. Accept your lot. Be humble. Wait for heaven. It is a very convenient theology for the powerful, almost too convenient, really. But within the same Bible are stories of bondage, deliverance, justice, exile, mourning, and divine regard for the oppressed. Black Americans hear those stories with acute attention. Moses matters, Egypt matters, the Psalms matter. So does the idea that every person has a soul no auction block can measure. This spiritual reading becomes especially powerful in informal gatherings. A few people meet after work. A prayer begins in a low voice. Someone adds a line from scripture. Someone else answers. The room, cabin, yard, or brush arbor grows fuller in feeling than its size would suggest. Firelight flickers on faces. Night insects pulse outside. The smell of earth and smoke wraps around the moment. A child half asleep leans against an older relative. The words spoken here may not be polished, but they are lived. Songs carry enormous weight in this world. They soothe children, mark worship, lighten labour, signal feeling, and help memory travel. A melody repeated enough times becomes almost a second shelter. Singing can happen in the field, in the kitchen, on the road, at a funeral, in worship, or in private grief. Sometimes voices rise together openly. Sometimes one voice starts alone, soft and worn at the edges, and another joins in. The harmony can feel less like performance than like holding each other up in sound. Music in 1800 among Black Americans draws from many sources. African rhythmic sensibilities, Christian hymn traditions, call and response structures, local styles, work patterns, and personal improvisation all mix in ways that vary by region and community. Scholars still disagree on how directly specific musical forms from West and Central Africa survived into particular Black American songs of this period, because the evidence is fragmentary and often filtered through outsiders. But they agree that continuity exists, especially in rhythm, vocal style, repetition, and communal participation. The music is not accidental, it is inheritance under pressure. The body participates in worship too. Clapping, swaying, stepping, moaning, rocking, and breathing together create a collective atmosphere that words alone cannot explain. In some settings this is welcomed. In others it is criticized by white observers as excessive, emotional, or improper. Such criticism reveals the critic more than the worshipper. A body that has been forced to labor all day may need to praise with its whole weight. Stillness is not the only form reverence can take. Prayer can be formal, but it is often intimate and immediate. A mother prays over a sleeping child. A father prays silently on the road. An elder prays for strength before a dangerous conversation. A young person prays from fear. anger, confusion, or longing. Prayer is not always serene. Sometimes it trembles, sometimes it questions, sometimes it sounds almost like argument. This too is faith. The God Black Americans speak to in 1800 is not merely distant majesty. He is often addressed as a witness who must surely see what men are doing. The church, where Black Americans can lead or gather with some independence, becomes one of the strongest institutions in free Black communities. In cities like Philadelphia, independent Black congregations offer governance, preaching, charitable care, and moral authority rooted in Black experience. People dress carefully for services. Children are expected to behave. Hymns are sung with seriousness. Offerings are collected from people with very little to spare. The room may be plain, but the dignity is not. Religious gatherings also create social worlds. People court, elders advise, widows are checked on. New arrivals are introduced, work is discussed. News is shared after the benediction in clusters near the door or just outside in the street. A church is a house of worship, yes, but also a school of character, a relief office, a meeting hall, and a place where Black life is interpreted by Black voices. That matters immensely in a society where most other institutions speak down rather than across. Funerals especially reveal the depth of communal faith. Death in 1800 is familiar enough to shape the culture of mourning, but each death still strikes the heart with force. When someone dies, family and neighbours gather, wash the body if possible, sit with the bereaved, and mark the passing with prayer and song. Burial customs vary, but the aim is often the same: to honour the dead fully, to insist that a life was lived and should not vanish into silence. Grief becomes shared labour, and faith gives it language. One curious feature noted in some accounts is the use of coded spiritual expression that could hold more than one meaning at once. A song about crossing Jordan may be about death, deliverance, baptism, or earthly escape depending on who sings it and who listens. Not every song is a secret message, despite later romantic habits of exaggeration. But the layered quality of spiritual language is real. Words become richer when spoken by people who must often say one thing publicly and mean another privately. For enslaved people, gatherings away from direct white oversight can be especially meaningful. Hush meetings, prayer circles in the woods, or small nighttime assemblies allow emotion and interpretation that formal services often restrict. Here, sermons may speak more directly of justice, singing may grow freer, tears may come without embarrassment. Testimony may include suffering named plainly rather than politely hidden. The fear of discovery is always present, which only sharpens the intensity. The very act of meeting becomes an assertion that the inner life cannot be fully managed. Children absorb faith early. They watch adults bow heads, hum old hymns, quote scripture, or speak of God's will with a seriousness that tells them this language matters. They learn prayers by repetition. They observe who comforts the grieving, who leads the singing, who visits the sick. Moral instruction enters through example as much as lesson. Be truthful. Be careful. Honour the elders. Trust in God. These teachings are spiritual and practical at once. Women hold central roles in sustaining religious life, even when male leadership is more visible in formal settings. Women pray, teach children, organise care, maintain order, preserve songs, support ministers, and often keep devotional practice alive inside the home. A grandmother with a Bible or a remembered verse can shape a household's spiritual life as powerfully as any pulpit. The texture of daily faith often rests in women's hands. Men, meanwhile, may find in religious life a form of authority otherwise denied them. To lead prayer, read scripture, exhort a gathering, or serve a church can restore public dignity in a world that constantly undermines it. Spiritual leadership offers a language of manhood not based on ownership or domination, but on steadiness, moral seriousness, and service to the community. This is one reason churches become so significant. They help reorder the meaning of worth. There is also tension within Black religious life, because faith never arrives in a simple package. Some are drawn to emotional preaching and spontaneous worship. Others prefer order, literacy, and structured doctrine. Some trust white-affiliated churches cautiously. Others reject them with good reason. Some focus on heavenly reward. Others keep asking what divine justice means for life here and now. None of these tensions weaken the community. They show that Black Americans are thinking theologically, not merely absorbing what they are told. Biblical literacy, even when partial, has extraordinary importance. A verse remembered can become guidance for years. A psalm can carry a person through fear. Exodus stories can teach children that bondage has never been the final word in sacred history. The ability to read scripture oneself is especially prized among free Black families and among enslaved people who can gain access to literacy. Reading allows interpretation without permission, and that fact alone makes some authorities uneasy. Music outside formal worship also serves emotional and social needs. Lullabies calm infants. Work songs coordinate labor or soften monotony. Recreational songs at gatherings bring movement back into tired limbs. Not every song is solemn. Some are playful, teasing, flirtatious, or gently comic. A community that sings only sorrow would be a community half erased. Joy keeps appearing in the music because people keep making room for it. The sensory atmosphere of these gatherings stays with you. Candle wax cooling on wood, pine smoke drifting through cracks, a bench rough against your palm, the rustle of skirts and coats as people settle, a low murmur before the first hymn, then the first note, slightly uncertain, then stronger, then joined by others until the room feels fuller than before. Sound changes the air. Even silence after a prayer feels inhabited. At times, white authorities misunderstand or fear this spiritual life precisely because it creates solidarity. A people who worship together, sing together, bury their dead together, and interpret suffering together are harder to isolate. This is one reason religious meetings can become sites of surveillance or restriction. Power often senses, even if dimly, that community is dangerous to oppression. Historians continue to debate how directly spiritual gatherings encouraged organized resistance in this exact period, but there is no doubt that they nurtured courage, identity, and hope. By the end of the night, when voices lower and people drift home through paths, yards, or city lanes, the feeling lingers. The burden has not vanished. No law has changed because of one hymn. No chain has fallen open because of one prayer alone. Yet something essential has been preserved. A person has remembered that they are more than their labour. A community has remembered that grief can be carried together. A child has heard adults speak as though justice belongs to God and therefore cannot be nonsense. That is the quiet power of faith, song, and secret strength in 1800. They do not erase suffering. They help people survive it without surrendering the inner self. In a nation busy counting bodies as property or labour, Black Americans keep insisting, in melody and prayer, that the soul remains out of reach, and in the hush after the last note fades, that truth can feel stronger than anything the daylight says. Money has a smell in 1800. It smells like damp tobacco leaves, river mud, cotton fibre, horse sweat, warehouse dust, and ink drying on ledgers. It sounds like quills scratching, scales shifting, barrels rolling, auctioneers calling, and coins clinking in hard hands. For Black Americans, this is not an abstract economy discussed in distant rooms. It is the system pressing directly on the body. Markets, credit, land speculation, and trade all shape daily life because Black people themselves are made into part of the calculation. The young United States likes to imagine itself as a nation of independent farmers, virtuous households, and energetic commerce. In reality, a great deal of that commerce leans heavily on enslaved labour and the buying, selling, hiring, mortgaging, and inheriting of human beings. Slavery is not some sad relic sitting politely in the corner. In 1800 it is tied to the growth of wealth, the movement of goods, and the confidence of men who consider themselves respectable. Respectability, again, proves to be a costume many people wear over ugly habits. If you are enslaved, your economic value may be discussed in front of you or around you as if you are livestock with better posture. Age, strength, skill, health, complexion, fertility, temperament, and tradability can all influence how owners or buyers assess worth. The language can be chillingly technical. A man may be praised for his carpentry. A woman may be noted for her cooking, field strength, or childbearing potential. A child may be spoken of in terms of future increase. The person remains fully human, while the market vocabulary works very hard to pretend otherwise. This is one of the central realities of black life in 1800. Enslaved people are not only forced to labour in the economy, they are inserted into the economy as assets. They can be used to secure loans, settle debts, divide estates, attract marriage alliances, or build a planter's public standing. A wealthy man's household may appear stable to the outside world, partly because he owns people whose labour, and sometimes whose sale, underwrites that appearance. The fine coat, the furnished parlour, the carefully ordered plantation books all rest on human captivity. Credit connects everything. A planter borrows money with land and enslaved people as collateral. A merchant extends goods on future crop expectations. A land speculator dreams of expanding westward and counts on labour to make the land profitable. A widow inherits property that includes human beings whether she welcomes the fact or not. An estate is valued, parcelled, and contested. Economic relationships ripple outward, and black families may be uprooted because somewhere in the chain, a white man made a bad decision and expects someone else to pay for it. Tobacco still matters in many areas, but cotton is beginning to transform the future. The cotton gin, developed in the 1790s, has made short, staple cotton easier to process, and the demand from British textile mills is growing rapidly. In 1800, the full explosion of cotton has not yet reached its later scale, but the direction is already visible. More land, more labour, more profit. The spread of slavery across the American South is not simply about traditional prejudice, though both are present. It is also about money moving toward opportunity with dreadful efficiency. Rice and indigo in the coastal South, tobacco in older plantation regions, livestock and mixed farming elsewhere, sugar farther south beyond the United States in this exact moment, all form part of an Atlantic world of exchange. Ships move goods outward and manufactured products inward. Ports matter enormously. Charleston, New Orleans soon enough, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and many smaller river towns are linked by this wider trade. Black labour touches nearly every step. Planting, tending, harvesting, processing, packing, hauling, loading, cooking for workers, building vessels, repairing docks, carrying goods to market. The chain is long, and black hands are all over it. If you stand in a port warehouse, the atmosphere tells the story at once. The floor is rough underfoot, dust settles on cuffs, hemp rope scratches your palms, a barrel leaks a little, a bookkeeper frowns over columns of numbers. Outside, cartwheels grind over stone while gulls cry overhead. Inside, the figures are neat. Outside, the labour is not. Yet the tidy books have a habit of winning arguments in public life, because numbers look clean even when they describe something filthy. Hiring out is an important part of this economy. Urban enslavers may rent out the labour of enslaved men and women to other employers for construction, domestic service, transport, or skilled work. In such arrangements, the worker may move through a wider world, handle money, or negotiate small practical details, but the wage or most of it flows back to the enslaver. Hiring out can create tiny spaces of autonomy in some cases, but it can also increase instability, expose families to separation, and turn every day into a reminder that your own effort enriches someone else by legal design. Free black Americans occupy a different but connected position within this market world. They labour for wages, sell goods, run small businesses, or practice skilled trades, and some achieve modest independence. Yet they live in an economy structured by racial hierarchy, white competition, licensing barriers, exclusion from guild networks, credit discrimination, and social hostility all limit how far their enterprise can go. A free black artisan may be excellent at his craft and still struggle to secure reliable contracts. A black woman selling food may be beloved by customers and still denied the stability a white vendor takes for granted. One little remembered part of this economy is the role black women play in petty trade and market exchange. They sell fruit, pies, vegetables, cooked dishes, herbs, fish, or handmade goods. Some are free, some enslaved. some operating under arrangements that blur the line between official permission and practical necessity. These transactions may look small beside plantations and ships, but they matter. They help families survive. They create local reputations. They place black women at the centre of everyday urban commerce in ways many formal accounts overlook. Markets themselves can be vivid and unforgiving places. The smell changes by the yard. Fresh bread near one stall, fish and brine near another, animal pens farther off, mud everywhere after rain. Calls rise and overlap as sellers compete and buyers argue over quality, weight, and price. Black people move through these spaces as labourers, sellers, porters, customers, and, in the most horrifying cases, commodities. Some markets handle food and tools in one section and human beings in another, as if the arrangement were normal. Repetition is how societies teach themselves to ignore obscenity. Auctions are among the clearest expressions of slavery's economic logic. A person may be washed, dressed, examined, and displayed for sale. Buyers inspect teeth, limbs, posture, scars, and demeanour. Questions are asked about age, skills, health, and family ties, though family ties often matter only if the buyer thinks they affect behaviour or price. The emotional violence is enormous even when the outward scene appears orderly. Records may note sums paid, names transferred, or terms of sale, while the fear in the room goes mostly unwritten. Historians continue to dispute how often buyers in 1800 preferred family groups to remain together compared with later periods, partly because motives varied and surviving records are uneven. Some sales did preserve units thought economically useful, many did not. Profit and convenience were the governing principles, not humanity. A mother might plead, a child might cling, a trader might shrug, the ledger remains tidy. That contrast tells you nearly everything. Inheritance is another engine of disruption. When enslavers die, property must often be appraised and divided. Children, spouses, cousins, creditors, and lawyers all enter the scene. Human beings can be listed beside horses, silver, furniture, and acreage. Some heirs keep enslaved families where they are. Others sell quickly to raise cash or simplify the estate. The dead man's household order dissolves into transactions, and black lives are rearranged accordingly. Mourning in one room may mean terror in another. Economic value also attaches to reproductive capacity. Enslaved women are seen not only as workers, but as bearers of future property under the legal principle that a child follows the status of the mother. This makes the intimate cruelty of slavery even more stark. Motherhood is treasured within black family life and monetized within the slave system at the same time. The same birth can be joy to a family and increase to an owner. Few facts reveal the moral corruption of the system more clearly, and yet numbers never tell the whole story, because black Americans keep shaping the economy in human ways beyond what the market intends. Skilled workers share techniques, build networks, and gain reputations. Women manage food economies with intelligence and discipline. Sailors and teamsters move information as well as cargo, garden plots, side earnings, and careful saving can create tiny zones of self-direction even within oppression. A person treated as property still thinks, plans, measures risk, and seeks advantage where possible. The language of value becomes especially distorted around skilled labour. A master may boast that his blacksmith, cooper, or cook is exceptionally valuable, meaning profitable, productive, difficult to replace. But this acknowledges a truth the ideology of racism tries to deny. Black skill is obvious, black judgment is obvious, black reliability, creativity, and endurance are obvious. The economy depends on them too visibly to hide. So the culture invents a contradiction. It praises ability while denying equality. It is a clumsy contradiction, but it proves durable. For free black families, money has a different emotional meaning. A paid debt, a rent payment made on time, a pair of shoes purchased for a child, a Bible owned outright, a little saved for illness or burial, all carry great weight. Economic survival is still precarious, but money earned by your own labour and directed toward your own household can feel like compressed dignity. It buys food, fuel, cloth, tools, and time. Not much time, Perhaps, but some. Property ownership, even on a small scale, matters enormously where it is possible. A room, a workshop corner, a cart, a lot, a garden patch, a small house. These things create rootedness. They can also make white neighbours uneasy, because black permanence challenges racial hierarchy in a practical form. It is one thing for society to tolerate black labour. It is another to confront black ownership. Ownership speaks in the language America most respects, which makes the prejudice against it even more revealing. Even leisure among whites often rests on black economic exploitation. While one man discusses Republican virtue in a tavern, another entertains guests in a parlour, and a third speculates on Western land. Black workers cook, serve, stable horses, clean boots, sew garments, and tend crops that fund the entire performance. The early republic's confidence is not only philosophical, it is subsidized. By evening, money recedes from sight for a little while, but not from consequence. A planter worries over debt. A merchant checks accounts. A widow counts coins by candlelight. A free black labourer calculates whether this week's wages can cover flour and rent. An enslaved family fears the rumour of sale because someone else's arithmetic has gone wrong. The economy is not a distant mechanism. It enters bedrooms, kitchens, church pews, and graves. This is what markets money and human value mean for black Americans in 1800. The nation is growing richer, more connected, and more confident, and black people are central to that growth at every level. They are workers, traders, craftsmen, sailors, cooks, vendors, and builders. They are also, under slavery, bought, sold, pledged, and inherited. The same society that depends on their labour dares to measure them in prices. That is the deep wound at the heart of the economy. Yet even within such a system, black Americans keep asserting a value no ledger can hold. In family life, in worship, in skill, in memory, in mutual aid, and in the stubborn refusal to become what the market says they are. They preserve another standard entirely. The books may count bodies. The people themselves keep proving that human worth cannot be reduced to a line in ink. Resistance in 1800 does not always arrive with thunder. Often it comes quietly, wearing an ordinary face, moving through the day in ways that look small to outsiders and feel enormous to the people involved. For black Americans living under slavery and racial restriction, resistance can be dramatic, but more often it is persistent, subtle, disciplined, and woven into daily life. You do not always get to choose the battlefield. Sometimes you only get to choose whether your spirit yields. If you are enslaved, open defiance is dangerous. The law, the household, the patrol, the overseer, and the wider white community are all arranged to punish visible refusal. This means resistance must often be measured carefully. A person survives by reading mood, timing, opportunity, and risk with astonishing precision. The smallest decision can carry consequence. Speak now or stay silent. Walk quickly or slowly. Hide the thing or move it. Trust this person or do not, delay or obey. Every choice sits inside the pressure of power. One of the most common forms of resistance is the protection of the inner self. This may sound abstract until you understand what slavery is trying to do. It does not only seek labour, it seeks compliance, dependence, and the shaping of identity around obedience. To preserve your own judgment, humour, memory, religion, naming practices, family loyalty, and sense of right and wrong is already a form of resistance. A person who remembers that the system is immoral has not accepted it, even if they must outwardly navigate it. Speech becomes part of this defence. Enslaved people often develop ways of speaking differently depending on audience. One tone for the master, another for the community, one set of words in daylight, another after dark. Meaning can hide inside phrasing, pauses, and expression. Outsiders sometimes mistake this flexibility for dishonesty, when in fact it is intelligence under pressure. When every careless word can be punished, language becomes a tool sharpened by necessity. Work itself can become a site of quiet refusal. A task is completed more slowly than ordered, a tool is misplaced, a repair is delayed, a misunderstanding is allowed to continue longer than it should. A break lasts a little extra minute. An animal is said to be difficult when perhaps it has only been encouraged to seem so. These acts do not overturn slavery, but they interrupt its fantasy of total control. The system wants smooth extraction. Human beings keep introducing friction. Scholars still argue over how much these everyday acts affected overall plantation productivity, because records often notice only major disruptions and ignore small ones. But the emotional significance is beyond dispute. To create even a sliver of choice inside coercion can matter deeply. It reminds the person acting that they still possess judgment. It reminds the system, however dimly, that domination is never complete. Stealing back food, cloth, time, or small goods can also serve as resistance, though it is often more accurate to call it reclamation. When rations are inadequate and labour is forced, taking extra cornmeal, preserving a bit of meat, collecting eggs, or using cloth scraps for family needs can feel less like theft than correction. The moral language of the slaveholder does not carry much authority in the kitchen of the hungry. Mobility offers other opportunities. Enslaved people sent on errands, hired out in towns, working on docks, or moving between properties may gather information, deliver messages, visit family, or create informal networks that authorities barely understand. Geography matters here. Roads, river crossings, market squares, churchyards, and back paths all become part of a hidden map. You learn where people gather, who can be trusted, which route avoids attention, and where dogs are likely to bark. Knowledge of space becomes a form of power. Running away remains one of the clearest acts of resistance, though it carries immense danger. Not everyone can attempt it. Age, children, pregnancy, injury, family ties, geography, patrols, dogs, weather, and the sheer difficulty of survival on the road all shape the choice. Yet many do run, whether for a few days, for weeks, or in search of permanent freedom. Some flee to nearby woods or swamps to escape immediate punishment. Some try to reach free black communities. Some aim for northern states. Some seek native communities or remote terrain where they might disappear. A runaway notice from the period often reveals more than the owner intends. It may describe a person's clothing, skills, language, scars, relatives, likely destinations, or talent for passing as free. Such notices, dry and practical on the page, unintentionally show the intelligence and resourcefulness of the person pursued. A man is said to be clever with tools, likely headed toward a port, able to read a little, or known to have kin on another plantation. A woman is described as determined, good at sewing, possibly carrying forged papers, or likely to seek family. The hunt exposes capability. Forgery and false papers become another method of resistance, especially for those with access to literacy or helpful allies. A pass that allows travel, a borrowed certificate, a written message altered just enough to satisfy a hurried glance can mean the difference between movement and capture. This kind of resistance depends on nerve as much as ink. To carry a document that may or may not withstand inspection is to walk inside danger with a controlled face. Literacy itself is a powerful form of refusal. To read or write under slavery opens channels the system would rather keep closed. Scripture can be interpreted privately, news can be understood directly, letters can be exchanged, names can be recorded, routes can be planned. Historians continue to debate how common secret literacy was in 1800 compared with later decades, but there is broad agreement that the desire for literacy was strong, and that even limited access could matter enormously. A single reader in a community might serve many ears. Women often resist in ways the official record undervalues because it prefers dramatic masculine action. A mother may hide a child from sale for a little while, preserve food, exchange information through domestic spaces, protect family memory, or use the routines of household labour to cover private acts. A cook hears things. A nursemaid hears things. A laundress moves between rooms and households. The domestic sphere is watched, but it also provides cover. Resistance can travel in baskets, aprons, wash bundles, and whispered instructions. Men may resist through flight, sabotage, work slowdowns, fighting back in sudden moments, or protecting others physically when possible. But gender lines are not neat. Women run away. Men preserve songs and children. Everyone calculates. Everyone endures. Resistance is not a fixed category, but a range of actions shaped by circumstance. Religion can strengthen resistance too, though not always in direct political form. To believe that slavery is morally wrong in the sight of God, to identify with biblical captives delivered from bondage, to gather in independent worship, to pray beyond the hearing of masters. All of this helps preserve a framework in which oppression is not normal. Faith can make suffering interpretable without making it acceptable. That distinction matters. A person can endure hardship spiritually without agreeing that the hardship is just. Music also carries defiant energy. A song can express grief, irony, longing, and solidarity all at once. Groups singing at work can control rhythm, reduce isolation, and remind people they are not alone. A line repeated together can feel like a tiny wall built against despair. Not every song is coded rebellion, despite later exaggerations, but communal music itself resists one of slavery's deepest aims, which is atomization. You're meant to feel alone. Song says otherwise. One quirky but revealing detail from some enslaved communities is the practice of using humor against power in indirect ways. Stories, nicknames, mimicry, and private jokes can quietly reduce the moral size of the oppressor. A pompous master becomes a figure of ridicule in retelling. An overseer's habits are exaggerated until he sounds less terrifying than ridiculous. Laughter in such moments is not trivial. It is a way of refusing to let fear take total possession of the mind. Collective resistance is more dangerous and therefore more heavily punished, but it exists. Groups may plan escape together, conceal one another, refuse orders jointly in limited settings, or prepare for possible uprising. The memory of revolts in the Atlantic world, especially in Saint-Domingue, hangs over white America with great force by 1800. That fear leads to harsher surveillance, stricter patrols, and quick repression. But fear does not arise from nothing. White authorities understand that domination creates enemies. They know the people they exploit are thinking. At the same time, many enslaved people choose not to join risky plots, not because they accept slavery, but because the consequences can fall on children, spouses, elders, and whole communities. Resistance is therefore full of moral complexity. To stay may be strategic, to flee may be brave, to wait may be wise, to act may be necessary. No outsider gets to rank these choices easily. Free black Americans also resist, though under different conditions. They organize churches, schools, mutual aid societies, and public petitions. They challenge insults, build businesses, print arguments, and defend kidnapped community members when possible. They make visible lives that contradict racist claims. A well-run household, a literate child, a skilled trade, a purchased home, a disciplined congregation. All of these act against the social order by proving black competence and continuity in plain sight. Public petitioning is especially important in some northern settings. Free black communities and their allies sometimes appeal for voting rights, education, protection from kidnapping, or the end of slavery itself. These petitions may be ignored, delayed, or politely buried under procedure, but they matter. They create a written record of black political thought and insist that the state must at least hear what it prefers not to answer. Resistance also lives in care. This may be the easiest form to overlook. To nurse the sick, teach a child, comfort the grieving, preserve a marriage, keep a family name alive, or bury the dead with dignity, all resist a system built on dehumanization. Slavery depends on making people fungible, interchangeable, and disposable. Care says no. This person is this person. This child belongs to this family. This elder must be honored. This death will be mourned properly. By night, after the visible labor ends, hidden effort begins. Someone carries a message. Someone studies letters traced in dust or on scrap. Someone plans a route by stars, rivers, and remembered turns. Someone keeps watch while others meet. Someone says a prayer for courage because tomorrow will require another face and another decision. The room is dim. The boards are rough. The danger is real. So is the determination. This is what resistance looks like for Black Americans in 1800. It is not always glorious in the way later stories prefer. It is often patient rather than dramatic, and cunning rather than loud. It lives in memory, movement, literacy, family loyalty, work habits, humour, worship, and escape. It appears wherever people refuse to become what the system says they are. You end the day understanding that oppression never has the final simplicity it desires. It wants obedient labour and silent souls. Instead, it gets human beings who think, adapt, hide, plan, love, sing, laugh, learn, and sometimes run. Even in the smallest acts, resistance keeps declaring a truth the age cannot quite bury. Control is never complete. Not while the mind remains awake. Power in 1800 does not only sit in plantations and parlours. It sits in courthouses, jails, state houses, patrol routes, tax records, and law books. It wears boots, wigs, seals, and signatures. It speaks in formal language about order, property, and public safety. For Black Americans, this legal and political world is never distant. It decides where you may travel, whether your testimony counts, how your freedom must be proved, what punishment can be inflicted, and how quickly protection disappears when you need it most. The young republic takes pride in its institutions. There are elections, constitutions, legislatures, judges, and an expanding culture of political debate. White men argue fiercely about federal power, states' rights, foreign alliances, taxes, and the meaning of liberty. Newspapers hum with partisan energy. Taverns and meeting houses fill with discussion. Yet for Black Americans, the central political fact is plainer than all the speeches. Most of this argument is happening in a system that either excludes you or uses you as a topic rather than a participant. If you are enslaved, the law almost always begins by recognizing someone else's claim over your body. Courts may treat you as property in disputes over debt, inheritance, injury, sale, and ownership. The law may punish you as a person while protecting you as property only when your owner's financial interest is at stake. It is a deeply twisted arrangement. You are human enough to be punished, not human enough to be fully protected. Legal logic can become very inventive when injustice needs a respectable coat. State laws vary, and this matters greatly. Some northern states are moving through gradual emancipation, creating complicated populations of still enslaved adults, indentured children, and free black residents with restricted rights. Southern states tighten controls around movement, assembly, manumission, and free black presence. In some places, free black men may vote for a time. In others, they cannot. In some places, emancipation is possible through private act or will. In others, it becomes more difficult. The map is uneven, but the direction in many slaveholding areas is toward greater control. Patrols are one of the most immediate faces of law for enslaved people. These are local systems of surveillance and enforcement, often carried out by white men who stop travellers, inspect passes, break up gatherings, and search for runaways, at night especially. The patrol can shape the feel of the countryside, hoofbeats in the dark, a lantern moving through trees, a sudden challenge on the road. The patrol's authority rests partly on law and partly on intimidation, which in practice blend together rather efficiently. Past systems reveal how deeply law enters daily motion. To travel from one plantation to another, into town, or along a road after certain hours, an enslaved person may need written permission. The past states who you are, where you're going, and sometimes when you must return. Without it, any encounter can become dangerous. A scrap of paper determines whether your movement is seen as lawful errand or criminal act. Such rules turn ordinary geography into a legal obstacle course. For free black Americans, law can feel just as close. Though differently, freedom papers must be shown. Curfews may apply. Residency restrictions may threaten newcomers. Licensing barriers can limit trades. Kidnapping is a risk because officials and courts do not always move quickly or fairly to protect free black people seized as alleged runaways. A free person therefore lives partly under the burden of constant legal self-demonstration. You're expected not merely to be free, but to prove it continuously in a society that profits from doubt. Courtrooms themselves are uneasy spaces. A black person may enter them as plaintiff, defendant, witness, victim, accused runaway, debt disputant, or subject of some property matter. But entry does not mean equality. In many jurisdictions, black testimony against white people is limited or excluded. This has enormous consequences. It means theft, assault, coercion, and kidnapping can become harder to challenge because the people most directly harmed are denied full legal voice. Silence is built into the procedure. Judges and magistrates often present themselves as neutral guardians of order, yet order is defined through racial hierarchy. The state worries constantly about insurrection, disorder, theft, and unauthorized movement among black populations, especially after news of revolts in the Atlantic world. Fear of rebellion sharpens policy. Gatherings are monitored. Weapons access is restricted. Manumission can become more politically fraught. White officials claim these measures preserve peace, though the peace in question usually means preserving domination without interruption. One revealing detail from the period is how often legal language around black Americans uses terms like dangerous, idle, disorderly, suspicious, or improper. These categories sound objective at first glance, but they are elastic enough to punish almost anything. A person standing in the wrong place may be suspicious. A group praying together may be disorderly. A free black labourer between jobs may be called idle. Law gains power from vagueness, because vagueness gives local authorities room to act on prejudice while sounding procedural. Politics at the national level also shapes black life. Even when black people have little formal access to political power. The election of 1800, for example, is remembered as a dramatic transfer of power between white political factions, but it takes place in a constitutional order that counts enslaved people for representation through the 3/5 clause while denying them rights. This means slavery increases the political weight of slaveholding states. Black bodies strengthen the influence of men who claim ownership over them. Few constitutional arrangements have been so openly cynical while still being called elegant. Expansion westward intensifies the stakes. As settlers move into new territories and states form from older western lands, the question of whether slavery will spread becomes a matter of political bargaining and local law. For black Americans, especially the enslaved, this can mean forced migration into harsher frontier conditions. For free black people, it can mean exclusion from certain regions altogether. Western opportunity for some becomes coerced displacement for others. Legislatures also shape the possibility of manumission. In some periods and places, owners can free enslaved people through wills or private acts with relative ease. In others, lawmakers require court approval, bonds, removal from the state, or additional restrictions designed to discourage emancipation. These rules reveal a central anxiety. Slave societies do not only fear rebellion, they fear examples. A free black population living visibly among the enslaved poses a challenge to the ideological claim that black people are naturally fitted for bondage. White politics often pretends that the black presence is a problem to be managed rather than the result of deliberate systems of exploitation. Debates emerge about colonization, control, labour discipline, poor relief, and public order. Rarely do those in power begin with the obvious moral starting point, which is that black Americans are people entitled to security and dignity. Instead, they ask how to regulate them, remove them, use them, or contain them. The framing itself is part of the violence, and yet there are flickers of hope in this legal and political landscape. Black petitioning exists. So do anti-slavery societies, especially in the North. Though their commitment and effectiveness vary, some white allies pursue court cases or legislative appeals. Free black churches and community leaders build collective pressure where they can. A few judges or lawmakers show signs of unease with the harsher edges of the system. None of this transforms the nation in 1800, but it matters. Hope in such an era is rarely loud. It often sounds like persistence inside narrow institutions. Children feel the law even when they do not understand it fully. They know adults lower their voices around certain topics. They know papers matter. They know patrols are feared. They know some roads are dangerous after dark, and some people can ask questions that must be answered carefully. Law enters childhood as atmosphere before it becomes concept. A child may not know what statute governs movement, but they know what fear feels like when hoofbeats stop outside. Gender also shapes how power is experienced. Enslaved men may be especially targeted as potential rebels or runaways. Enslaved women face legal vulnerability in matters of labour, punishment, sexual coercion, and motherhood with little formal recourse. Free black women trying to maintain households and economic independence must navigate a legal system that combines racial and gender prejudice with alarming efficiency. Black men seeking civic respect encounter rules and customs that deny them full public manhood. Law does not merely regulate labour, it organises humiliation. Religion and law sometimes intersect awkwardly. Some Christian reformers criticise aspects of slavery or seek better treatment of the enslaved. Others defend the institution with scriptural confidence that would be impressive if it were not so morally bankrupt. Black churches and ministers therefore operate within a world where religious principle can support either protection or control, depending on who is speaking. This tension sharpens political awareness. Words like justice, liberty, and brotherhood cannot simply be trusted because they are spoken from a pulpit or printed in a pamphlet. Historians still disagree over how much ordinary black Americans in 1800 followed formal political developments such as elections, legislative acts, and constitutional controversies beyond their immediate local consequences. But there is strong reason to believe awareness was broader than many older accounts allowed. News travelled through churches, docks, taverns, letters, barbershops, markets, and travellers. People knew enough to recognise hypocrisy when they saw it. A nation proclaiming liberty while policing black gatherings was not difficult to interpret. The sensory experience of legal power can be stark. The courthouse smells of dust, paper, wax, and damp wool. Boots scrape on wood floors. A clerk dips his pen and writes quickly. The jail nearby smells worse. All stone, stale air, straw, and fear. In the State House, voices debate principles in measured tones, while outside a labourer lifts cargo under the sun. Institutions make themselves felt not just through ideas, but through spaces, sounds, and the confidence with which officials occupy them. For free black communities, one response to this hostile legal world is documentation and organisation. Records are kept. Births, marriages, baptisms, debts, and property arrangements matter because proof matters. Community leaders write letters, preserve names, and maintain memberships. There is practical wisdom in this. Where the wider society may deny your standing, paper created by your own institutions can help hold life together. Memory is precious. So is paperwork. Night offers no full escape from power, but it changes its appearance. Laws remain, patrols remained, jails remain, and politics continues somewhere beyond the dark. Yet in homes, churches, and community spaces, another order briefly competes with the official one. People pray, talk, sing, teach, plan, and remember. The state may define them as property, suspect, or subordinate. Their own communities define them otherwise. That difference keeps hope alive. This is what law, power, and fragile hope mean for black Americans in 1800. The legal system is not neutral ground waiting to be fairly used. It is largely built to preserve white authority and protect slavery's operation. Politics amplifies that reality at local, state, and national levels. Yet black Americans continue to navigate, challenge, petition, document, worship, and organize within the narrow spaces available to them. The hope here is not naive. It does not assume the courts will suddenly become just or that politicians will wake in a moral mood. It is thinner and tougher than that. It lives in a signed petition, a church ledger, a free paper kept dry, a child taught to read, a community that watches for kidnappers, a rumour that some law may shift, a sermon that names God's justice, a person who survives another inspection without surrendering self-respect. Fragile hope is still hope. In a world so crowded with rules meant to diminish black life, even that matters. Night settles over America with a confidence the day never quite has. The roads dim first. then the fields, then the riverbanks, then the windows of houses where candles burn lower and lower behind small panes of glass. In 1800, darkness does not erase the nation's contradictions. It simply softens their outlines for a few hours. The work slows, the shouting thins, the ledgers close, the patrols still move, the laws still stand, and the chains still exist. But in the hush of evening, you can feel more clearly what Black Americans have carried through the whole day and the whole age. You hear it in the sounds that remain: crickets in the grass, a pot scraped clean, low voices from a cabin door, hooves farther off on a road, water slipping past a dock post in the dark, a baby stirring and then settling again. These are small sounds, almost delicate. Yet they belong to lives lived under extraordinary pressure. That is the truth the nighttime reveals. Beneath the giant machinery of slavery and racial control are individual people still breathing, still loving, still thinking their own thoughts. If you are enslaved, the end of day may bring some relief to the body, but never complete safety. Muscles loosen slowly after labour. The shoulders ache with a heavy dullness. Hands pulse where blisters hardened long ago into thick skin. Smoke from the fire settles into your clothes and hair. A bowl of food warms the palms for a moment before it empties. You sit or lean or lie down where there is space. And the first real quiet of the day begins to gather around you. This quiet can be beautiful and uneasy at the same time. Evening has a way of making tenderness possible. Family members can speak in fuller sentences now. Neighbours can share a little news. Someone mends clothing by the light of a candle stub. Someone braids a child's hair carefully for tomorrow. Someone hums while turning over a thought too serious to speak aloud. But every tenderness exists beside uncertainty. Morning will come again. Orders will return. A rumour of sale may still be true by dawn. The body rests. The mind does not fully trust rest. For free Black Americans, night can feel more settled within the home, but outside the door the wider world remains suspicious and hard. A rented room or small house may hold a kind of dignity, not visible from the street. Chairs are arranged neatly. Clothing is folded for morning. A Bible rests on a table. A mother counts coins. A father reviews plans for work. Children fall asleep to the murmur of adults discussing rent, church matters, an illness, a school lesson, or a neighbour's trouble. It is domestic peace. Yes, but never careless peace. At this hour, you understand how much of black life in 1800 depends on what is created in private. Not because Black Americans are naturally hidden people, but because public life is so often arranged to diminish them. In private spaces, the scale changes. A woman is not merely labour, she's a mother, daughter, singer, cook, believer, neighbour, keeper of remedies, memory, and household order. A man is not merely a worker or target of suspicion. He is a father, husband, craftsman, teacher, worshipper, protector, teller of stories. A child is not merely future labour or a social problem in the eyes of others. A child is beloved. This private fullness matters because so much of the public world denies it. The nation speaks grandly about freedom while denying Black Americans its ordinary protections. It uses black labour to expand farms, ports, roads, and fortunes. It counts black bodies for political advantage. It polices black movement, distrusts black education, fears black gathering, and makes black family life vulnerable to sale and separation. Yet night reveals a stubborn fact. Black life cannot be reduced to the uses white America assigns to it. By 1800, the spread of slavery across America is not merely a regional habit. It is a national development with immense consequences. New lands draw slaveholders westward. Cotton promises rising wealth. The domestic trade in enslaved people is poised to grow more central. Political arrangements continue to protect the institution. White society, in many places, is not drifting reluctantly into slavery. It is actively organizing around it. That truth is important because it prevents comforting illusions. The system is not expanding by accident. Men are choosing it. And still, Black Americans are choosing too. They choose, where possible, to marry, to raise children, to pray, to sing, to learn, to save, to organize, to flee, to stay, to endure, to resist in whatever form the moment allows. Choice under oppression is constrained, but it is not erased. A woman cannot always choose whether she labors tomorrow, but she may choose what story to tell her child tonight. A man cannot always choose where he is sent, but he may choose whether to pass along a warning that protects someone else. A free black family cannot choose whether the law respects them, but they may choose to build institutions that insist on their dignity anyway. One of the most powerful things about black life in 1800 is that it remains creative under pressure. You see this in food, clothing, worship, language, music, naming, labor skill, humor, courtship, and care. A society that would prefer obedience keeps meeting originality instead. A society that would prefer silence keeps hearing song. A society that would prefer isolation keeps finding community. This is not sentimental. It is practical and visible. People make culture because culture helps them live. There is sorrow here too, and it deserves honesty. Many do not escape. Many families are broken. Many children grow up too quickly. Many elders carry losses too large for words. Many free black people spend their lives proving what should never be in doubt. Many enslaved people die with no lawful recognition of the wrong done to them. Nothing about endurance cancels this suffering. Strength is real. So is injustice. The one does not tidy away the other. At the same time, the nation's moral failure is increasingly plain if you look at it directly. The contradiction between liberty and slavery is already visible in 1800 to anyone willing to see. Black Americans certainly see it. Some white Americans see it too and turn away. Others see it and profit anyway. Others challenge it in limited ways. But the contradiction remains, hanging over the republic like smoke that will not clear. A country can say all men are created equal. The people carrying chains know whether the sentence has arrived in their lives. Children sleeping tonight across the nation will inherit this unfinished world. Some will awaken enslaved in cabins and quarters where labour begins before daylight. Some will awaken free in modest homes where parents guard papers and save for schooling. Some will be taken west as the slave frontier expands. Some will grow into ministers, artisans, mothers, sailors, washwomen, teachers, market sellers, rebels, and community leaders. The future is hidden from them. But one thing is already certain. Black Americans will continue shaping the nation even when the nation refuses to honour that fact. This shaping happens materially and spiritually at once. The nation is built by black hands, fed by black skill, enriched by black labour, and morally tested by the treatment of black lives. Every road hauled into place, every crop packed for export, every household runs smoothly through hidden labour. Every church founded in independence, every petition written, every child taught a letter or a prayer becomes part of the country's real history. Not the polished version, the real one. Historians still debate many details of this era. They argue over regional variation, the exact extent of literacy, the spread of certain marriage customs, the influence of African continuities in different communities, the political awareness of ordinary workers, and the subtle effects of everyday resistance. Those debates matter, and they refine the picture, but they do not alter the central truth. Black Americans in 1800 live inside a nation where slavery is spreading and racial restriction is hardening, and they meet that world with humanity more durable than the system expecting to crush it. There is also a strange irony in the confidence of the age. Many white Americans in 1800 assume their arrangements are solid, sensible, perhaps even permanent. The plantation order seems profitable. The laws appear enforceable. The politics feel manageable. The hierarchy looks natural to those benefiting from it. Yet history has a habit of exposing false permanence. What feels stable in one generation can become shame in another. The people called powerless often carry the future in forms the powerful cannot yet read. As the hour grows later, the edges of everything soften. Firelight dips and rises. The room grows warmer near the coals and cooler near the door. Outside, the sky deepens. The stars over fields and towns look equally distant, equally calm, uninterested in the categories that govern life below. In this stillness, you sense that survival itself is not a passive thing. It is active, disciplined, often communal. To survive a world built to cheapen you while keeping your affections, your humour, your memory, and your moral sense intact is a profound achievement. That is what remains with you at the close of this journey into 1800. Not only the cruelty, though the cruelty is real and must not be softened. Not only the labour, though the labour is everywhere. Not only the fear, though fear touches nearly every corner of black life in this period. What remains just as strongly is the evidence of presence. Black Americans are not shadows moving through someone else's story. They are the makers of homes, songs, skills, relationships, institutions, and meanings that endure beyond the moment of oppression. So now the country drifts deeper into night. The fields go dark, the city streets quiet, the river keeps moving. Somewhere, a mother settles beside her child. Somewhere, a father stares into the embers before finally lying down. Somewhere, an elder finishes a prayer. Somewhere, a young person imagines another life with a seriousness no law can prevent. Somewhere, a free family closes the door and guards its little circle of safety. Somewhere, an enslaved family gathers close because closeness is what they still possess. And over all of it lies the silence that comes after a long day, when the world seems to exhale and even grief loosens its grip for a little while. Let that silence widen now. Imagine the night air cooling the dirt roads and wooden porches. Imagine the smoke lifting softly through dark rafters. Imagine tired hands at last becoming still. The voices grow quieter. The candle burns lower. The house settles around you with small creaks and whispers. No speeches now. No ledgers. No commands. Only the slow breathing of people who have endured another day. You rest with the knowledge that history is never only made by presidents, laws, and battles. It is also made in cabins, kitchens, meeting houses, workshops, and narrow city rooms by people who keep their humanity alive when the age gives them every reason to lose it. Black Americans in 1800 do exactly that. They carry sorrow, faith, wit, labour, tenderness, and courage into the dark, and they leave their mark on the nation whether the nation is ready to admit it or not. So let the roads fade, let the fields disappear into shadow, let the river become a low silver ribbon under the sky, let the last murmurs soften into stillness, and let this long, difficult world finally grow quiet enough for sleep.